Hi, and welcome to The Apologician. We're continuing to look at Hemant Mehta, The Friendly Atheist's 78 Questions for Christians. We're taking it up right now at question number 14 and 15. These questions are kind of putting the two ideas together, so I'm going to run with it. If you ever heard stories about an amputated limb growing back, how come there's never a camera around when anything like that happens? How come there's never any cameras around when miracles happen? These are amusing questions simply because most people don't stand around with their iPhones in position just in case a miracle happens so they can get a Kodak moment. I mean, does Hemant walk around with his camera poised and ready just in case a miracle would happen? I would think not, because Hemant doesn't believe in miracles anyway. But then my question is, why then should he fault anyone else for not having the camera handy when the miracle comes their way? I mean, he is certainly not walking around expecting to see one. But let me up the stakes a little bit. We know that car accidents happen pretty much every day. And we don't disbelieve the reports of them simply because no one had the camera ready to take a still shot of it. You rarely, if ever, can have your camera in the right position just in time to catch the car crash. I mean, you may be filming something at the time and the car comes into your shot, or maybe the car crash was planned for making a movie, but you can never really know when a car crash is going to happen, and it's usually over before you can get your camera in position. It's over too quickly, no one's expecting it. So why in the world would Hemant complain about Christians not having the ability to catch miracles on camera when you can't even catch everyday experiences like car crashes on film with any regularity? So he can take his two questions and apply them to car crashes. Let me see if he comes out believing that there's no such thing as automobile collisions simply because we don't have a lot of camera evidence. But I also want to look at Hemant's view of miracles for just a moment. Hemant's complaint is that no one has the camera around when miracles happen. Now, John Lennox has debated Richard Dawkins in two separate debates. He pointed out in the second debate, it has science buried God, he pointed out that unless a universe was operating with fixed natural laws, with normalcy, you wouldn't be able to recognize a miracle when it happened, and Richard Dawkins conceded that point. The irregularity of it is what forces our attention to it. For example, Jesus' resurrection from the dead. It would not be a particularly unique event if dead bodies were popping up every day. It's precisely the uniqueness of Jesus' resurrection that forces us to look at this with a greater curiosity and wonder. Why did this man do this? How could this man do this when we know that this is not something that normally happens? And I don't want to be condescending here, but this is something that I need to say. This is a point that seems lost on a lot of modern atheists. Christians have no problem recognizing that everybody else stays in their grave, that this is the normal way things happen, while at the same time we believe that Jesus did rise from the dead. We believe that's the reason why we consider him worthy of worship and adoration. He's unique. He's special. We believe him to be God incarnate. So has it ever occurred to an atheist that this is the very reason why Christians find Jesus so worthy of adoration and admiration is because he's done something that no one else has ever done? He's done something that's beyond the pale of normal. It's the uniqueness of the event of the resurrection that singles out the attention to this person. That's why, by the way, David Hume's anti-miracles arguments don't work here. This whole idea where we don't have a lot of experience of dead bodies popping up, so there's no reason for us to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. After all, nobody else that we know of has done so. Here's the point. Just because no one else has ever risen from the grave or risen from the dead, that is not a proof that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Okay, Christians are not claiming that everybody arises from the grave, nor are we saying it happens by a naturalistic process. We are claiming that one particular special individual in history rose from his grave. The argument is invalid because it's overemphasizing one point while de-emphasizing another. The argument does not turn on whether or not everybody else stays in their grave. The argument turns on whether or not Jesus stayed in his grave. So this extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence chestnut is really overused and overemphasized. Now, in one of Hemant's other videos, he actually says that this is an argument that atheists have got to learn to stop saying. He thinks that any evidence would be better. So he says, I don't need to raise the bar that high. I don't need extraordinary evidence for an extraordinary claim. I just need to have some evidence. We'll deal with that later. But my thing that I think is very funny is people say, those who do hold to this argument, they'll say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and then they believe that Jesus never lived in history. We do have evidence for that. So it's really not a matter of evidence. You even have authors, for example, like Bart Ehrman. He's an agnostic leaning toward atheism. He's certainly not trying to promote a Christian worldview. But he recently wrote a book called Did Jesus Exist?, trying to show the atheist community that they're propping up a false argument. Even though Bart Ehrman doesn't believe in the supernatural elements of Jesus' life, he certainly believes that Jesus was a historical person. Now, Hammond deals with that in one of his other videos as well. He asks the question, did Jesus really live and does it even matter? Or, in his wording, why it doesn't matter. The point is this. Natural laws implicitly assume that there's no interference or intervention going on from an outside personal agent. So let's take the whole idea of Isaac Newton under the apple tree, the observation of the law of gravity when it was at work. The natural law of gravity says that an object will fall because gravity is the force that pulls it downward, and then it will hit the ground. Now, if Newton is under the apple tree and he catches that apple before it falls, or he picks an apple off the ground, he's not violating the law of gravity. He's simply a personal agent who's intervening, and that, for the moment, makes the natural law it makes it a suspension of the natural law. He's not overruling it. He's simply intervening. And the natural law of gravity doesn't assume that anyone is messing around. It doesn't assume that a personal agent is involving themselves or intervening in some way. So now Hume tries to argue that miracles are violations of natural law. But that's because he sees natural laws as prescribing what should be rather than simply describing what has been observed. So catching an apple before it hits the ground or picking an apple off the ground doesn't violate the law of gravity. It's actually just simply a person intervening. And that suspends, for a time, the implicit rules of the natural law, because the natural law doesn't assume anyone's involving themselves with the circumstances. So Hammond's questions assume that someone can just have their camera ready when an amputee grows a limb back. Isn't that convenient? This is asking a question into the air. Next time we're going to look at question 16 and continue on as best we can. God bless and take care.